Welcome to the first CyclingScore Inside Track event. We're broadcasting from 1 Canada Square in Canary Wharf, London, from the offices of the very hospitable Canary Wharf contractors who are responsible for building these rather impressive buildings behind us. We're delighted that so many of you could join us from all over the world. For those of you who are new to CyclingScore, we certify and can design the active travel facilities of buildings. Any type of development can be CyclingScore certified, from commercial offices, as we will see today, to residential developments and even shopping centres. These Inside Track events will be a series of virtual tours of the best examples of office and residential active travel facilities across the world. Today's event will give an in-depth tour of the new active travel facilities at the office development Castlemead in Bristol, England, which were designed by us. It's the first building in the world to achieve a 100 out of 100 Platinum CyclingScore rating. Along the way, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and we will try and answer some at the end. Without further delay, let's get the tour underway. Please enjoy the tour.
With the help of CyclingScore, Castlemead has managed to achieve a perfect platinum score of 100 out of 100, which makes it the first building worldwide to achieve that rating. It just goes to show that an existing building of that age is capable of surpassing the requirements of new developments or even the standards set out by the local authorities.
Castlemead was developed in the 70s. It was built up to the 8th floor in the 70s. The recession hit and the building was stopped. The building was finished in 1981. We bought the building a couple of years ago, and my primary aim is to add value to the building. And one of the big opportunities we saw was with the beta space and creating something really special for the building and for Bristol. One of the main reasons we focused on a cycling and micromobility hub is the fact Bristol has the highest proportion of journeys undertaken by a bicycle of any city in the UK. We thought delivering a scheme of this nature will help to really kind of future-proof the building and make it as user-friendly as possible for the tenant.
There was no need, there was no planning requirement for Castlemead to deliver this project, but it was kind of the client's aspiration to ensure an old building doesn't get left behind. At CyclingScore, we're cyclists, so we're not building it with someone else in mind, we're building it for ourselves and what we'd like to see in place. So by removing or breaking down barriers in buildings such as the lack of showers, lack of lockers, lack of variation in parking, it means that the people that may not have considered cycling into work or actively commuting into work may now not have those barriers in place.
So down here in the basement there are 341 bike racks, there are 400 lockers, 18 separate shower rooms, an enormous drying room, a bike maintenance stand, a ironing station, a water bottle filler. So we really have tried to think of everything in terms of the scheme and really working through the design to make sure nothing was forgotten. The users were at the forefront of the project and just made to be as welcoming and as accessible as possible.
It's a space not where you should just dump your bike. It's somewhere that you should sort of enjoy before you come into work. Visually, if that's something that's looked like it's had some time and effort spent on it, you're more likely to want to sort of spend time in there and utilise that space. So our team looked at how we could actually create graphics in lots of the different areas. Everything would sort of tie together. So as you look through the distance of the space, you would see the different hints of colours through the pillars, and then you'd see little snippets from the repair station in the back, and that almost sort of like wants to lure you in. CyclingScore really care about delivering a quality product, and I think the graphics are integral to that, and you know, throughout all of their projects that's going to be something that's at the forefront.
The benefit of having active travel facilities of this standard means that more people will actively commute, which means less reliance on private vehicles and public transport. And as a result, you'll have cleaner cities, less congestion, and healthier people.
Welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed the tour when we finally got the audio working. Obviously, there were many elements to the facility you just saw. So now Alex, the head of CyclingScore's design service, and Chris, creative director from Binding Box, will talk you through the facility and give a deeper insight into what it includes and some of the thinking behind it. Alex designed the facility, and Chris is responsible for the realisation of the fantastic surface graphics and signage you saw throughout the facility. So over to you, Alex.
Thank you. So before we begin our tour of the finished article, we thought it was a good idea to show you what the building looked like prior to any of the works commencing. We believe this will help you better understand the extent of works that were undertaken, whilst also hopefully allowing you to recognise more potential in your own assets, existing assets, or projects. Even though we knew from the outset that the new cycle store was not going to be located where the existing original cycle store was, it was good for us to survey how those cycle stores operated. In that way, we could understand the active travel, active commuter cultures within the building. From the images, you can see that there were 3 different locations, and they were of varied degrees of quality. So some were secure, all of them were at max capacity. None of them were in the building. They were in a sheltered area, but they were not within the building. The variation was not there in terms of the types of cycle parking. Not very user-friendly, not inviting, and didn't really feel safe. However, the fact that they were operating at max capacity, even though they were of, in our opinion, poor quality, showed that the building had really strong cycling or active travel cultures in place. From the access from the ground floor level to the basement, this is quite a crucial point for the building. This is probably one of the reasons why this building achieved a perfect score, because it was lucky enough to have a dedicated side access, a pedestrian access that belonged to the building and led occupants or users of the cycle vault directly from the ground floor level into the basement, with no crossover between vehicles and active commuters. So there was a separate lobby area from the reception, and it was supported by a goods lift that serviced the basement only. Once in the basement, there was the facility were lucky enough to already have a ramp in place. The gradient wasn't quite right, so that got rectified later on. But it was one of the features that we saw as a bonus. It could have been, in our opinion, was a feature that was worth utilising. Plus, it was practical. The general arrangement within the basement consisted of multiple storerooms that were mostly underutilized. This is not uncommon to see with basement areas. The finishes were bare, unfinished. It was not very welcoming. It was quite dingy, but it was never designed to have tenants or occupants down there to begin with. But as a space, it was about 6,000 square foot of usable space once all those storerooms were removed. And more examples of what the basement looked like. So in the image that you're seeing in front of you, this is the post-refurbishment image of the reception, Castlemead. So the objectives of the refurbishment from the client's perspective were to provide a better work environment for the tenants, encourage emission-free travel to and from the building. This would have a knock-on effect to the ESG benefits and credentials of the building, which is very important to the client. They wanted to reposition the building within the market so it doesn't get left behind due to its age. And they also wanted to improve new letting and tenant retention prospects. From CyclingScore's perspective, we wanted to prove that with good design, existing buildings are capable of delivering outstanding active travel facilities. We wanted to deliver a space that was designed around the end user. Like we said in the video, we're keen cyclists ourselves, and so is the client. So we were designing things that we'd like to use or we'd like to see if we were working in that building. We wanted to ensure that all of our requirements were met to the highest standard. That's quite crucial because both our and the client's aspiration was to achieve a perfect score, which is 100 out of 100. And to achieve that, you have to meet all of our scoring requirements to the highest standard. But ultimately, what we wanted to achieve and what we would be happy to walk away with would be an increased number of active commuters within the building.
I think as well, Alex, on that point, what's interesting in this particular project is how the client, Floyet, and Greg Davison from Floyet, is a cyclist, obviously himself, and obviously the project manager, Knight Frank, and Christian Crawford, they've obviously been cyclists, so it's quite, it made our life slightly easier, I guess, as well, didn't it?
Everyone on board happened to be involved in cycling in some way or another. Either it was social or it was for commuting. I know the architect was a keen cyclist, so was Greg, so was Christian from Knight Frank. So
it's not buying, wasn't it?
Everyone's on board. Everyone, whenever you talked about little details that would improve a cyclist or an active commuter's end experience, they got it straight away, which was crucial, and that's why they saw value in chasing that 100 out of 100. They just thought, yeah, we can get the marketing benefits, but we know ourselves the end result will be the best it can be.
Yeah, that's great.
So with the approach into the cycle vault from the landscaped areas in front of the building, we want to make it as intuitive and as easy to follow as possible, whilst also being safe and secure. So we achieved that by incorporating clear yet discreet signage that both were informative and also aesthetically sympathetic to the building's sleek new exterior. We didn't want it to conflict with what the architects had designed for the front of the building. So it was a clear distinction between the approach signage and then the signage that were within the basement area. Chris will talk more about that in a second. The external areas were repaved in slip-resistant stone pavers. The drainage was improved, so they drained water quickly on rainy days. The lighting was improved. PIR system was in place as well, so when you get shorter days or people are working till late, there are no dark spots within the side access. It was quite important to us to make it feel as safe as possible. And also on the safety note, as it is advertised from the front of the building that this is a cycle store, we want it to be secure. So 2 layers of security is what we'd like to see in place for security before you enter the building. So that's achieved by an access-controlled gate as a primary barrier, and the secondary means of security was a access control door. CCTV is also in operation within that side access.
Yeah, and I think as Alex has touched upon, this is quite an integral part of the start of the wayfinding strategy. So we wanted to have something that's illuminated so you can actually see it at night, and to guide you into the space, but we didn't want to have the words cycle store in big letters and sort of advertise what that is. So the people the tenants that are going to be using the space are already kind of aware where it is. It sort of leads you into that first stage. And then just really it's about thinking the iconography that's used on this follows suit as you then sort of lead through into the next stage, into the store itself.
Yeah, and the client was quite keen to keep the theme quite separate from the outside into the inside. So it's almost like a surprise when you then enter the building. It changes completely, which we'll see in a second. So what you're seeing now is you've gone past the first layer of security, which is the access control gate, and you are faced with the second layer of security, which is again an access control set of doors. We wanted to make the lift lobby area, we wanted to design it in such a way that it draws you in and also provides hints of what's to come once you're in the basement. There were wall spaces that were kept clear to allow for display screens to be installed, which will promote up-and-coming events and initiatives that the building will have in place. It's quite important for the building as they're going to have a really strong engagement service in place to communicate and interact with the tenant and encourage them to be more active. A new larger lift was also installed to accommodate up to 3 bikes and riders at a time. The lift solely serves the cycle vault users and only has to travel 1 floor to get to the basement, which means our peak hours wait time is kept at a minimum. There's also a secondary route down to the basement, which is via set stairs, and this is for anyone to use if they're in a rush, don't want to use the lift, they want to do a few more steps either to work or leaving work, but also manages bottlenecks if they ever occur, high peak commuting times or hours. They could potentially use the stairs to offer some relief to the primary, which is the goods lift or the cycle lift.
Of course, on that note as well, obviously, this facility wasn't designed just for cyclists either, was it, Alex?
No.
So that's why the stairs could obviously be used by runners, for example.
Yeah. So, like James said, if you're not a cyclist and you don't want to wait, queue up without a bike to access the facilities, resort with the stair access for people that are running or using other modes of active travel that don't require a lift to get them down to the basement.
Yeah, and then this, in terms of the theme, this is almost the starting point, isn't it? The yellow band that you see across the areas, that's the Tour de France yellow, essentially. So this is just subtly sort of introducing that before you get into the space. And things like the LED neon sign that we've got there as well, it just emits that nice hue. So you sort of see that glow as you're coming through to those doors, as you come in. And then, you'll see in a minute how that sort of continues throughout the rest of the space.
I mean, with the theme, we explored different themes, different colours, different styles with the client beforehand. But in this instance, I think that the colour, especially that yellow, led us down the Tour de France theme. It wasn't the reverse. We didn't think, we like the Tour de France, let's try and mimic that and represent that throughout the facilities. It was more the reverse, where we liked the colour, and then we thought, hang on, Greg's a keen cyclist, he was a big fan of the Tour de France as well, so we thought, why don't we go down that route and explore it, and luckily it turned out really well. Plus, I think the fact that Castlemead is an old, iconic building, it felt like a retro theme was, or
Yeah.
retro style.
Suited really well,
Yeah,
didn't it?
was quite in keeping. It's not a modern building, it's not a new development, it's an old building, so we felt old images of old 50s Tour de France events or races were more appropriate, more approachable even. So now we are in the basement. So you saw what the basement and around the area looked like before the refurbishment took place, and now you can see it post-works. So once you arrive, like we said before, you arrive at a slightly elevated position due to the ramp. So this is quite a unique feature to this building because it almost gives you a bird's eye view of the facilities, which is it's not common. It's not something that you come across. So we found this really helped with navigating the space and providing users with a better sense of direction when they arrive. The original ramp had to be extended, like we said in the beginning, to make the gradient a bit safer and more user-friendly. Plus, slip-resistant chevrons were added or applied to the surface of it, which were both functional and decorative.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's just, as you were just mentioning before, there's just such a great subject matter to work with in terms of the imagery. So the first thing that you see as you walk down the ramp is the peloton images, and these are cyclists. I mean, the person at the front there is over 3 meters tall, so it really sort of creates that kind of wow factor. So it's the first time that you're using or interacting with the space, it's great to make that statement piece. And then you'll see sort of for it as well that the chevrons are utilized through some of the graphics for the field as well. So just tying in those just subtle little touches there, but obviously as well making sure it's anti-slip. It's going to be on the ramp. It matches with the same sort of rail colours that we use for the scheme. All these little details just make sure that everything looks consistent.
Yeah, so. Yeah, definitely. Plus everything, all the imagery chosen seems to be directional. So it follows the direction of the ramp, and then the graphics around the rest of the facility also help direct you. So whether that's noticeable or not, they're not by chance. All of these choices were made for a reason. So moving on down the ramp, you enter the cycle store, the main cycle store. So we wanted the entire facility to flow as naturally as possible in a natural sequence, from arriving all the way to departing the active car facilities. We achieved that by having the cycle store followed by the lockers, followed by the drying room, followed by the showers, followed by the exit. The type of quality, the quantity of products that we recommend is crucial to the performance of a facility. We would like to see a certain number of certain variation in racking systems to accommodate for all types of bikes. It can be, nowadays you have road bikes, you have people commuting on mountain-bikes, cargo bikes, e-bikes, trikes, recumbrants. There's just so many bikes, and you have to have enough variation built in to accommodate for any type of user. So for this project, we predominantly have the majority of spaces are two-tier racks with gas-assisted upper tier. We've got again two-tier e-bike specific racks. We've got a number of Sheffield stands which also have power to them for more awkward bikes that can't be stored in a two-tier system, traditional one. We've got folding bike lockers and also scooter racks. So this is something that shows the development of the project, that early on, in the early designs of this basement, we didn't have scooter racks in place. But throughout the 2-year design process, we found that they were becoming more and more popular. And then throughout, again, the 2-year period of the design, we found that they got introduced in Bristol themselves. So we thought, let's revisit this and incorporate it into the basement to make sure that the building's as future-proof as possible. In terms of the colours, all the racks were colour-coded to match the overall theme of the facility, so nothing was kept bare or kind of off the shelf. Everything's customized to be as in keeping and consistent, like Chris said, with the overall theme.
Yeah, and I think that was just important in terms of that the collaboration as well, isn't it? It's just sharing those details and making sure that everything is going to be the same hints of colour. But yeah, I mean, this is one of my. I think it's just such a simple thing, but the hints of colours on the pillars of the different winners of the jersey stages of the Tour de France. It's such a big space. I think it really needs those, those punches of colour all the way through. I think it can take it, without it looking in a smaller space. It might look a bit over the top. It might be, it might be too much. But you sort of looking with these. It's a space with no windows. It'd be particularly, could look quite dark or quite dingy without it. So the appropriate lighting then allows these areas to shine. And as I was saying before, you can sort of see your way through sort of each. You get little sort of snippets, don't you, into each of the sections as you walk through and interact with it.
Plus, I think the textures that you've used in the graphics or the wraps or the pillars and on the walls help bounce the light off throughout the facility. I know you mentioned that earlier in the video, that it kind of helps with the light reflect off the graphics and it brightens up the space.
And yeah, and it was really, that's the thing, because you mentioned before that it's not all like a brand new space, so not all the walls are perfectly plastered and finished. So with some of the graphics, we actually used boards that stood off, and that would give you a point that was actually flat and that was smooth and detached away from some of the more kind of like unfinished looking areas of the building as well. So it's just, using lots of different mediums to sort of fit within the space.
I mean, a lot of credit goes to the client for having the ambition to go that extra mile, because it would be a lot cheaper and quicker to apply the vinyl onto the surfaces that were already there. The end result would be nowhere near as good, and your life would be harder. However, for the client, it would be quicker and cheaper. However, that wasn't the case for any part of the facility.
It was towards the end, wasn't it? When the decision was taken later on to actually paint the floor, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Again, they showed flexibility there, because they obviously decided that not painting the floor would have left it not looking as good as it could do, and they decided to do it.
Yeah.
So, as you said, I think a lot of credit needs to go to the client. Being flexible throughout the design process.
Yeah. These are just some more images of the products and the different zones or cycle parking zones or active travel zones that we've built alongside the graphics. The repair station was quite a crucial point of the facility, because it was tucked away, so we wanted to bring it to life as much as possible and make people from the far end of the facility know that there is a type repair station within there. So it was sat on top of a plinth, which raised it off the floor a bit. There is a ramp that's going to resolve the change in level to make it even more accessible. The illuminated sign that Chris designed helps brighten up that corner as well. It's also, other than the fact that it looks really good, it's functional as well. When you're repairing the bike, it provides additional light from the back of the rack when you've got the bike mounted on it. In terms of the product we used, it's excellent. It's got all the types of tools you'd expect to find on a premium rack. You can carry out any type of repair on site yourself, or if they have an on-site doctor bike event, they can set up camp over there for the day and carry out maintenance for the occupants.
Yeah, and I think this was another area where the typography that we've used starts to come into play. So you'll see it later on through the King of the Stairs graphics that we've got in there as well. But it's just kind of being playful with what it is. It doesn't need to just say repair station in big letters, giving it the nice sort of a 1950s kind of feel of what you might see in a French garage, to sort of with the neon sign there as well. So I mean, I hope with this, it sort of, I don't know, it makes people, more interested in want to check the bike over a bit more regularly and maybe spot something ahead of time as well, because it's not something that's always at the forefront of your mind, and it can be a little bit of a pain, can't it? But to get it up onto that rack, it's got everything that you need right away.
Yeah, and on that note, I think what was great about that sign is really that's something you'd only normally see like front of house within a building, like within a reception area. So to actually have something like that in the active travel facilities in the basement, I think says an awful lot about the building, and that these active travel areas facilities should be treated more like front of house, because for a lot of people arriving at buildings nowadays that have these facilities, that's exactly what they are. They are their reception.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good addition to the design.
Definitely.
So these are some additional features to the variation that we discussed, and how we make the facility as user-friendly as possible. So on the far left, you've got the scooter rack, which also has power to it for people to be able to either park kick scooters that are not electric, or if they have, eventually if electric scooters become legalized, they can park them and charge them throughout the day. The folding bike lockers that you see in the middle image, again, signed accordingly so people know. It's not right to assume that everyone that turns up at the facility knows what each product does. So clearly signing each product resolves that issue of people just not knowing what each product does. So we wanted to eliminate that and make it, again, as easy as possible. And we believe folding bike lockers is a bit of a sticking point with councils. They don't recognise them, but in our opinion, there's no better way of storing a foldable bike other than in a locker. On the far right, it's a lock store rail. So we always incorporate them in the project we design, because they're a neat way of storing your locks when they're not in use. So let's say when you turn up at the facility, or mostly when you leave the facility and you don't want to take the locks with you, what most people do is lock them on the rack that they were previously using. If you don't turn up for the rest of the week, that rack that you've just locked your lock to becomes, you can't use it. No one else can use it after you. So in this way, you can keep it somewhere securely out of the way, and you make the facilities look as nice as possible.
Yeah, and it's just exactly what you were saying there. I think just the wayfinding is kind of, it's integral to everything throughout. One thing that we've looked at here is just to keep it that same consistent line, so that the yellow band that ties all the way through, the top of that is eye level, and we've utilised that to sort of be the point where all the different wayfinding is used throughout the scheme as well. And
we're still looking to improve on things, as in these facilities may look complete, but we're always in the background reviewing them and looking at these daily and thinking, how can we make this even better? And a few comments that were made internally when we were reviewing these images, we thought, well, not everyone will know that this rail attached to the pillar will be for storing locks. So we had a discussion about providing some iconography that is informative and say, store your locks here, and make it even simpler for users to understand how to best use the facilities. The same applies for the scooter racks. It might not be as intuitive for someone to recognise that these are scooter racks. So it may have achieved 100 out of 100, but we're always looking at it in a way of how can we improve it further.
The graphics on the lockers, my favourite part of the facility.
So for the lockers, there's the quantities and spec we like to stick to. It's quite structured and it's quite simple. We like to see 20% more lockers versus cycle parking spaces. This provides a surplus for users that choose alternative modes of transport to travel to, such as running or scooters or whatever it may be that's not cycling. There's a surplus of lockers that they can have access to. This can be for lunchtime runners or people that take part in lunchtime activities.
We've had skateboarders more recently.
Yeah, exactly.
They're making a comeback, it seems, in the era of active travel.
As for spec, we'd ideally like to see lockers have space for hanging clothes. We'd like to see them ventilated, and we'd like to see them keyless. So, for example, digipads, like we've incorporated in this project, or the next step would be the RFID system. Due to the mass of the lockers, we had to be clever with the colours and the designs to help break up the repetitiveness of it. And this was done with different colours on the doors, and also the graphics that Chris designed to go on the face of the doors.
Yeah, I think that was it when we initially looked at sort of just the bands of colours themselves. I think on a smaller scheme that might have been enough, but when you see that there's a vast array of lockers, there's a huge number in this space. So it's just some little details that we looked at, which were the silhouettes of cyclist icons, but looking again to not make these too new. So we were looking at a more retro kind of looking bike and cycle helmet and the gear that riders of Tour de France would win, and tying in a few jerseys there. And it's such a simple, easy thing to do, but it's made quite a big difference.
As I said, it is probably my favourite part of the facility, which probably is a bit strange thinking about it, but I think it kind of takes something that's very quite boring, which is just blocks of lockers, and you actually do find yourself walking past them, looking at the various graphics just to see what
they're fun, they're light-hearted. We wanted the facilities not to be, they weren't serious facilities, they were exceptional facilities, but we wanted them to be light-hearted and cheer you up when you're down there. So there's some clever wordplay within the graphics and the hats, and there's a floating banana that any cyclist or active traveller recognises as the go-to energy food. And then you, after you've hung up your gear, your helmet, your running shoes, or whatever, if it's a rainy day or a really hot day, you want to utilise the drying facilities. So the facilities at Castlemead and within the cycle vault are enormous, but delivering a drying room that performs is not as easy as it sounds. The M&E team that were appointed to this project worked very hard to ensure that the drying room had enough heating and enough extraction in place to allow items to dry out without the common build-up of odours and damp that you get in most drying facilities. As for the products, we specified a variation of hanging solutions for clothes, shoes, towels. We also have benches in place to have some to sit down as you're putting on your shoes.
The ironing board.
Yeah.
The addition of the ironing board.
As well as a wall-mounted ironing board or ironing station, and that folds up neatly into the wall, and you can iron your clothes, your shirt, your trousers, whatever it may be, before going to work if you've had them in your backpack.
I just think that's genius, because that's it. It's just no matter what you do, everything comes up a little bit crumpled, or you've got to put with at the end of the day. It's putting that wet kit back on again, and then just it was only little touches that we were looking at here. It was just the little graphic that you can see to the left was of a lot of riders sort of stood huddled together as if it was at the end of the day, and imagine that's what they'd be doing before they go into the drying room themselves. But it's also it's the first thing that you see at the end of the corridor. So it's just that kind of viewpoint again to sort of lead you in. It could have just been another yellow band. So it does follow the same height as the rest of the yellow band, which just gives that a little bit of texture and just a little bit of a point of difference there.
And every time we walk down there, you focus on a different face. I find it's like every time I turn up, there's like a different thing I focus on. There's so much depth to it, and there's so many people grouped into it. It's quite interesting. It's something different that you come across every time you walk down there. At some point, you'll recognise everyone. I appreciate that. But
that's a change of graphic now.
Once you're done with the drawing room, you will make use of the shower facilities. So there's a 50-50 split between male and female cubicles. Within the basement, there's 9 male, 9 female, 1 DDA, and so there's the additional cubicles within the building as well. They're clearly marked, so there's no confusion as to what's what. There's benches, hair dryers, and vanity areas throughout, both male and female DDA, and they're all equally fitted out with no difference between them.
Yeah, and I think again, it's just, you can see here from the image on the left, it's just the wayfinding. So was just looking to consistently get that band at the same height, look at where it cuts in with the architraves around it, and then to the left you've got these folded signs which are fixed straight to the wall, which give you that sort of side profile sticking out, and then you've got the actual graphic there that goes straight onto the door itself. So they're just like an acrylic that just gives that, just again, a little bit of depth. But it could have just been a vinyl, but these are the extra details that the client chose to sort of to upgrade and just to push those little finishing touches. So I think that's again simple things, but I just love the way that crops into the side of the door itself as well.
And it gives the sign gives nice shadows. We really, when we put this design together, we expected some pushback, and we expected these kind of fancier designs and signs would probably get omitted down the line. But it just wasn't the case. We just saw it, just wanted it to look as good as possible, and we're so grateful that they were so open-minded and on board with it, because the end result is so much better than if it was a vinyl structured wall. But even if it was, it's something, and it's better than nothing. So for facilities that may not have
spaces, isn't it?
Yeah, if they don't have the space, they don't have the budget, it's just giving inspiration that something's better than nothing. Just whitewashed spaces are no longer the way to go. People know better, people expect more. So even if it's not fancy signage that is coming away from the wall, as long as there's something there, some sort of intent, consideration to the look and feel, that's really important for a facility, or for the end user as well. And these are more images of the band at the end of the corridor, which Chris talked about with a group of people. And also to the right is, we want to make the stair access, which is the secondary way of exiting or entering the basement. We want to make it more playful, and we had a chat with Chris as to how we can have a bit of a play on wording and graphics that would encourage users to use the stairs as opposed to using the lift. So you came back to us with some suggestions, and this was
and we thought with Tour de France, obviously because of like the King of the Mountain, and which I know we threw about, and then came from the client was looking like, King of the Stairs, trying to sort of say like, take that little extra step to go and use the stairs maybe over the lift. But it gives you again the imagery that you can use. When you see that panned out more, that's someone going up a grueling hill climb there as well. But if you look back to the very first images that you showed, that was just a breeze block access entrance, and it was just very uninviting.
Didn't it?
Yeah, so painting it grey and then putting that graphic at the right at the landing area of the stairs there completely transforms the space. And again, that's just sort of vinyl there, so it wasn't like a hugely expensive piece to put on there, but the impact I think is massive.
Yeah, with a bit of paint and a graphic and different lighting, it transformed just a basic
hugely
service stairwell that wasn't really used for anything else other than fire exit. And that's basically concludes the tour of the cycle hall.
Great. Cheers for that, Alex. It was really good. Before we close out and show the video again at the end, I think it would be quite interesting to cover a point that regularly comes up with clients or potential clients that are interested in improving their active travel facilities. And that is basically whether, could something like that, what we've just seen at Castlemead, which is 6,000 square foot space, could it be done with a much smaller space? Now, obviously we know the answer is yes, but why would you say that is, Alex? And why is it worth investing in a smaller space?
Well, the way we score buildings are not determined on quantities alone. So if you have a small space and it's a small building in general, it means your requirements will be less as well. However, if you have a big building, but you don't have the space for the infrastructure, you still have the ability to score really well. If you have good quality of products, if you have good look and feel, like we said, it doesn't have to be expensive to look good and be inviting, but also part of our scoring criteria looks at the occupier engagement services, so the softer measures that the building has in place, the management team has in place to communicate with the tenants and hear whether the tenants are happy or whether the building will have initiatives in place, whether they're bicycle user groups or run clubs, there might be adopt a bike events. So all these topics help with the building's overall rating, which allows it, the way we've structured our criteria, it allows a building that may have not great infrastructure to still score well overall through its engagement services. It won't be 100 out of 100, but it still has the option of or the potential of achieving a platinum rating with facilities that are not excellent or infrastructure that's not excellent.
We're putting you on the spot now, Alex. Out of the 250, say, developments we've certified, so some of them have 10 buildings with them, some of them are just one. How many would you say scored very well, but kind of relied on their engagement to boost them up a tad? Would you say?
How many?
How many out of the 250, approximately?
How many out of the 250
and scored well, even though they didn't have the sort of top?
I'd probably say 60%. 60% of buildings probably scored, even if they weren't scoring very well to begin with on their engagement services, because they realised that, well, maybe they don't have the budget or the ability or space to improve their infrastructure. They then focus on improving their engagement services throughout their license period with CyclingScore. So even if they didn't know that to begin with, throughout the process with us, they realised, well, there are some easy wins on making this environment or the active travel facility more enjoyable for the occupants. And that can easily be done through soft measures and engagement services and initiatives.
So the soft measures are bicycle maintenance, for example?
Yeah, they could be a bicycle maintenance event that could be carried out, provided by the building, and it could be yearly, it could be monthly, it depends on the appetite. It could be, like I said, clubs, if the building set up clubs on platforms such as Love to Ride or Strava. It could be for running, it could be for cycling. It's just making more of a community feel within the building, and maybe bringing people together that have common interests, common hobbies that may have never spoken before, but through these platforms, through these initiatives that the building sets up for them, it creates a topic of discussion or common interest.
I think that's absolutely right, because how a cycle-friendly building shouldn't just rely, or active travel-friendly building shouldn't just rely on the facilities itself, should they? To be truly kind of active travel-friendly, the services and the soft measures need to be in place as well, don't they?
Yeah.
So
it just promotes someone that may not have chosen to cycle to begin with, may have got into contact with someone that does cycle, and suddenly they choose that they decide one day that they can. And on that topic, actually, Castlemead had a pool bike system in place. So we didn't mention this, that Bristol, for example, doesn't have anymore a public hire scheme in place for people to hire bikes daily or by the hour or however you want to use them. So we introduced a Brompton pool hire bike scheme. So it's a locker with Brompton bikes within them, and they can book them out through reception for the day or by the hour, and that allows people that either don't have their own bicycle yet and they're reluctant to try cycling or commuting into work. They'll be able to hire out a bike, try it for a week, and say, you know what, I want to start actually commuting to work.
Yeah.
You're giving them that option. Or people a lot of times commute to work with a very expensive bike that they might not want to lock up when they go to meetings. So it gives them that flexibility to not take public transport or a taxi or a car to go from building to building. It gives them that flexibility to take a bike.
Certainly was. No, it's great. Well, that's it from us. So thank you very much for joining us. We will shortly show the video once again, once we've left your screens. If you do have any developments that you're interested in getting CyclingScore certified, then please do get in touch. I highly recommend you follow our LinkedIn page, where we post about recently certified buildings and other interesting things that are going on in the active travel world. And we will also post about the next Inside Track event there, which we will do quarterly. So keep an eye out on where what the next building is, or development is, and where we'll be broadcasting from. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With the help of CyclingScore, Castlemead has managed to achieve a perfect platinum score of 100 out of 100, which makes it the first building worldwide to achieve that rating. It just goes to show that an existing building of that age is capable of surpassing the requirements of new developments or even the standards set out by the local authorities.
Castlemead was developed in the 70s. It was built up to the 8th floor in the 70s. The recession hit and the building was stopped. The building was finished in 1981. We bought the building a couple of years ago, and my primary aim is to add value to the building. And one of the big opportunities we saw was with the beta space and creating something really special for the building and for Bristol. One of the main reasons we focused on a cycling and micro-mobility hub is the fact Bristol has the highest proportion of journeys undertaken by a bicycle-friendly city in the UK. We thought delivering a scheme of this nature will help to really kind of future-proof the building and make it as user-friendly as possible for the tenant.
There was no need, there was no planning requirement for Castlemead to deliver this project, but it was kind of the client's aspiration to ensure an old building doesn't get left behind. At CyclingScore, we're cyclists, so we're not building it with someone else in mind, we're building it for ourselves and what we'd like to see in place. So by removing or breaking down barriers in buildings such as the lack of showers, lack of lockers, lack of variation in parking, it means that the people that may not have considered cycling into work or actively commuting into work may now not have those barriers in place.
So down here in the basement there are 341 bike racks, there are 400 lockers, 18 separate shower rooms, an enormous drying room, a bike maintenance stand, a ironing station, a water bottle filler. So we really have tried to think of everything in terms of the scheme and really working through the design to make sure nothing was forgotten. The users were at the forefront of the project and just made to be as welcoming and as accessible as possible.
It's a space not where you should just dump your bike. It's somewhere that you should sort of enjoy before you come into work. Visually, if that's something that's looked like it's had some time and effort spent on it, you're more likely to want to sort of spend time in there and utilise that space. So our team looked at how we could actually create graphics in lots of the different areas. Everything would sort of tie together. So as you look through the distance of the space, you would see the different hints of colours through the pillars, and then you'd see little snippets from the repair station in the back, and that almost sort of like wants to lure you in. CyclingScore really care about delivering a quality product, and I think the graphics are integral to that, and you know, throughout all of their projects that's going to be something that's at the forefront.
The benefit of having active travel facilities of this standard means that more people will actively commute. which means less reliance on private vehicles and public transport. And as a result, you'll have cleaner cities, less congestion, and healthier people.